Tom, let's start off with the Mitch Garber saga. I heard you talking this morning with Andrew about it. You talked about him as a possible owner. You also brought up the issue, and I played it for him, by the way, when you talked about a tweet that he had put out where he basically called, I guess, blanket sweeping generalization that all Anglo-Quebecers never really took the time to get into French culture, to adopt it. And I played this for him, and here was his reaction.
I like and respect Tom, and, it's easy to take a tweet and interpret it in a way that maybe it wasn't meant to be interpreted. I do think that the Anglophone community, a lot of the members of the Anglophone community have not adopted French, have not really ensured that their kids speak really good French and write really good French, or watch French television or French movies, or become in any way involved in French culture. And so I did make that statement, but again, it's a tweet.
Okay. I followed up, by the way, Tom, by saying, that's not really fair to just generalize. There are plenty of Anglos here. Obviously, you feel the same way, who've done exactly that. So what do you think?
And I'll log roll with Mitch and say I like and respect Mitch. But it was, the part that got to me the most was the end of that tweet, because he said that the Anglophone community had not materially changed its way of thinking since 1976. And that's an opinion. But let's look at a fact. You and I were talking about this yesterday, that, the new restrictions on English CJAD. If you're admissible to English school, even if you went to French school, you're not going to be part of that quota. So a lot of parents are scrambling because, of course, there's a bureaucratic nightmare going on right now, and the CJADs don't have access to the database and all that. But what it reminds us is that tens of thousands of Quebec Anglophone families who could have sent their kids to English school or to immersion, but a lot of them, tens of thousands, have sent their kids to French school, saying, I really want them to have a great grounding in French. So that's an objective piece of information. And I'll swing it around another way. What would our reaction have been if Francois Legault had gone in front of the microphones and with his index finger in the air said, the Anglophone community has not materially changed its way of thinking since 1976? We'd all be outraged. So I do respect, it's true, I do respect Mitch. I think he's done some tremendous outreach, and I don't know whether they're going to continue thumbing their nose at his entreaties to start speaking about it. But I wish him well. He doesn't need anything from me in the business field. But I do think that if the Gazette comes on the market, we could do worse than to have Mitch Garber take care of it.
Well, let's talk about that. We spoke to Andrew McLeod from Post Media today, too.
And we asked him specifically about this community advisory council that they're creating, and what that's going to do. What's your opinion? Is a community advisory committee going to save anything at this point?
Well, it depends on
Mitch was asked to be part of it, I should point out, Tom.
Well, I think that's actually a good thing, because one of the problems that I have with the English-speaking community, I was in Alliance Quebec as Director of Legal Affairs in the early, mid-'80s. So that's 40 years ago. And most of the people that I see and hear out there, they're all people who've been around since that time. Now, I don't take anything away from them, and they do have rich experience. But when we came in and basically took over, putting a bunch of the other groups into Alliance Quebec, that's why it was called the Alliance, and putting in a really young leadership, I hope that there's a relatively, and I do, the older I get, the more I find everybody else is young. I find that Mitch represents a different generation. He's one generation younger than me, and I think that there are a lot of really great young Anglophones who should be part of that. I don't want to take anything away from people who have, done yeoman service to the community, but they've done their service. And we really, if we want to have a voice that's listened to, it's got to include a lot more young people. So as much as I love some of those voices who have been around for 40 years, I really hope they reach out and they can constitute a panel that's diverse ethnically in terms of origin, that is diverse religiously, and that is diverse in many other ways. So I think that's a great idea.
But is that going to save jobs? I mean, really the idea...
Oh, heck no.
Yeah.
Look, I was listening to, I think it was Jonathan Goldblum. I know that Michael Goldblum headed up the Gazette for a while back, back in the day. Yeah. And he's another one of the guys, great guy, by the way, just an absolutely fantastic guy with incredible service to the community over the years. And he's headed up, he's been the chair over at CBC Radio Can. He's done amazing things. But Jonathan was mentioning that when Michael was taking care of the Gazette, there were like 300 people in the newsroom, and now they're already down to 30 or something like that.
40.
And 40, and they want to lower it to 30, I guess. And you started going, okay, so what is this? Like, is it like a small local paper? When I moved back from Quebec City to Beaconsfield, to the West Island, there was a great local newspaper called, the News and Chronicle. But I mean, you knew that thing was put together maybe by a dozen people. Well, is that what the Gazette's going to be for a population of almost 1 million? That would be a shame.
You know, what's interesting, and I want to move on, is the fact that every time we bring up the Gazette, we invariably get texts and phone calls from people saying, I would support the Gazette. I can't even get it delivered to where I live. And that's from across the island, Tom.
Yeah,
so
I know, and
that's
they've
part
got
of
to
the
figure
issue.
that out.
Yeah.
And by the way, you're talking to a very, very long-term Gazette boy. I delivered the Gazette in elementary school, all through high school, and I still had a Gazette route into CJAD because I came from a very large family, and if we wanted pocket money, we had to work for it.
Yeah.
So I've been close to the Gazette in every way over the years, but I think they've got to get that figured out. And one of the things that they might want to do, too, I mean, you know, there are other papers out there that sell ads, but they also ask the public to pitch in and to help them out that way. I don't think that they should exclude that either.
We shall see. I just think, you know, having spoken to Andrew McLeod, you know, he said what he had to say corporately, I think, but I didn't see a lot of hope in there.
What was the upshot of it? Like, basically, don't call us, we'll call you.
Well, no, it was kind of like, we'll take a look. It's a very important paper, the heritage, and on and on and on, all the right things to say. But at the end, this advisory council is really all about getting people on board to help sell ads to their friends so they can hopefully fund it. No, but that's in essence what it means.
What he said is they're going to reconsider trying to save some of those jobs.
Yeah, they're not going to try. They're going to reconsider.
But
and there's another thing at play here too. You know, there are some TV stations that have a presence in Montreal that have very little actual activity going on in Montreal, but they have to have an antenna in Montreal if they want to sell ads across the country as a national network. So you can understand why Post Media wants to hold on to Montreal as well for advertising, because you're selling an ad and you're saying, but also, you know, you're in every major
the whole country, right?
Including Montreal. Yeah, exactly.
And that was part of his point too. It would be incredibly hard to dismantle, to sell one newspaper when it's part of under the umbrella of Post Media. So
yeah, and the other thing is too, of course, they want to make sure that we're all reading the stuff that comes out of the National Post, because that makes up more than half the paper on most days.
Yeah, sad but true. All right, let me move on to this. Quebec, Francois Legault calling for more flexibility from nurses, not from the government, from nurses in negotiations. Tom, we've been kicking this ball back and forth for so long. How are we expecting them to give in any more than they already have?
Look, there's one thing on the table that Legault and Dubé and Sonia Lebel can do. Legault's the premier, he makes the calls. Dubé's the health minister. Sonia Lebel has a title that very few people care about or have heard of. She is the minister responsible for the application of professional legislation. What's that? She's the minister in charge of the Office des Professions that oversees the Quebec Order of Nurses, that flunked almost everybody on the last exam for reasons that have more to do with a long-standing arm wrestle about what level nurses should be trained at. We've got dozens and dozens of CJAPs across the province turning out nurses. We have 10 universities, because the University of Quebec system has a bunch of antennas where nurses are trained at the university level, and they flunked them in record numbers. That is the object of a report that's already, the interim report from the commissioner in charge of this said there's something fishy going on here. We're waiting for his final report, but he's got experts on it right now to make sure that nobody can poke holes in it. But for heaven's sakes, where's Sonia Lebel? Where is Christian Dubé? Where is Francois Legault about getting more nurses there? With regard to whose job it is to fix this, our nurses are the lowest paid in Canada, and these bunglers have contrived to actually lower their salaries by 20% for the ones who are graduated from university, who can do the most expansive scope of practice. So they've been messing it up, and now they're trying to blame the victims. Shame on Legault, shame on the government.
All right, that said,
I'd like to move on to Quebec Health and Seniors Minister Sonia Bélanger tabling this new bill. It's called Bill 11, and it just expands medical assistance in dying here in Quebec. And it's going to allow people who have a long-term ailment to, like Alzheimer's, to apply early, but it will not extend to any kind of mental disorder, Tom. What do you make of this?
I think it's smart because they're holding back on the second part, which is actually ready. It could have been drafted. It could have been tabled. But since the federal government has exclusive jurisdiction over criminal law, they couldn't go that extra step without imperiling, making it a real risk that a doctor or other health professional involved in medically assistance in dying could have been really put into the corner if they had taken care of somebody who had a mental illness. But with regard to a degenerative disease like Alzheimer's, if you've locked in your consent while you were still lucid and you were told this is the diagnosis and this is what it's going to lead to, then you can have your medical assistance in dying, your MAID, they call it, if you've already gone through all those steps. It's certainly the only province that's gone so far. I think it's well thought through. The medical community is very much on board. We'll see if there's any reaction to it from the feds, but I have a feeling that it's going to be other provinces that are going to be imitating what Quebec's just done.
All right.
All right, Tom, thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Great
We'll
to
talk
talk
to you
to you.
tomorrow. You bet.